The world has been waiting for the next big disruption in technology, but few expected it to emerge from Africa in such a spectacular way. A continent often underestimated for its innovations has just shocked the globe with something so radical, so game-changing, that even the world's largest automakers are on edge. Africa's first fleet of free energy cars has officially hit the market, and it's sending tremors through the halls of power, across the auto industry, and deep into the hearts of oil giants who for decades have dictated the pace of progress. It began quietly, almost in secrecy. Engineers working with Maxwell Chikumbutso's revolutionary energy technologies had been testing prototypes for years. Cars that ran without fuel, without charging, without reliance on any external power grid. Vehicles that seemed to defy physics, drawing energy from an invisible source, sustained by systems once dismissed as fantasy. But today, they are no longer prototypes hidden in research labs. They are parked in dealerships, gleaming under showroom lights, ready for ordinary citizens to purchase and drive. The announcement spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered outside the first dealership, unable to believe what they were seeing. Sleek electric vehicles stood lined up, each carrying the promise of freedom, not just from fuel pumps and charging stations, but from the very chains of energy dependence. Families walked through the showroom in awe. Some touched the cars as if needing to confirm they were real, while others whispered in disbelief, "A car that never needs fuel." The answer came in the form of live demonstrations, as test drivers stepped in, turned the keys, and drove for miles with no battery swap, no charging stops, just endless motion powered by invisible currents. What made it even more fascinating was the price tag. At only $14,000, these cars were positioned to be affordable, far less than many electric vehicles already on the global market. The affordability coupled with limitless energy created an explosive combination. Within hours of opening, the dealership was flooded with pre-orders. Some customers recorded videos, instantly uploading them online. Social media erupted, hashtags trending across continents, debates igniting on live news channels, experts scrambling to explain how such a leap in technology could emerge from a part of the world long sidelined in the global innovation race. But beneath the excitement lurked unease. Oil industry insiders whispered of impending collapse, while traditional automakers quietly convened emergency meetings. How do you compete with a car that costs nothing to fuel, nothing to charge, and keeps running endlessly? The very foundations of the trillion-dollar energy economy seemed to tremble. A reporter asked one of the dealership's managers if they feared backlash, and his reply was simple yet powerful. "This is not just a car, it's freedom. And freedom always finds a way." Yet, what makes this moment even more astonishing is not just the technology itself, but the message it carries. Africa, once seen as a consumer of global technology, is now setting the pace. The launch of free energy cars is more than a product release. It's a declaration that the world has underestimated this continent for too long. Standing on the dealership floor, surrounded by curious buyers, one could feel history in motion. The story wasn't about cars anymore. It was about liberation, innovation, and the unstoppable spread of an idea whose time had come. And this was only the beginning. For every dealership opening today, 10 more are being prepared across the continent. Rumors circulate that global investors are already scrambling for partnerships, while skeptics demand proof that the cars can sustain long journeys. In response, Maxwell and his team announced something bold, an open public demonstration. A challenge to the world. Let these cars drive for days, for weeks, without a single refuel or recharge, under full observation. That announcement only fueled the fire further. Journalists booked flights to Africa, influencers live-streamed the countdown to the event, and the world braced itself for either the confirmation of a revolution or the collapse of a dream. As the first free energy cars rolled out of the dealership onto city streets, traffic slowed, cameras flashed, and cheers filled the air. Ordinary people had become witnesses to what may one day be remembered as the turning point when humanity broke free from its energy chains. Would this technology be embraced by the world, or silenced by the powers that stood to lose everything? That was the question hovering in the air, unanswered, but burning brighter with every mile the cars drove effortlessly into the future. The announcement of a global public demonstration electrified the atmosphere. Within days, stadiums couldn't hold the crowds, so Maxwell's team arranged for open highways and city routes to become the stage. Africa, once overlooked in the global narrative of progress, was about to host one of the most watched events in modern history. Cameras from every major network were mounted along the roads, drones filled the skies, and millions of viewers tuned in live streams across YouTube, Twitter, and television. The rules were simple. 3 vehicles would race in parallel: a Tesla Model S, a high-end gasoline-powered sedan, and Maxwell's free energy car. The challenge was not about speed, but endurance. They would drive across 1,000 miles of mixed terrain, city streets, highways, and rugged countryside, without stopping for fuel or recharging. Every moment would be monitored, every mile recorded. At the starting line, tension was palpable. The Tesla stood gleaming, its polished design reflecting years of engineering prestige. The fuel-powered car revved its engine with a confident roar, a symbol of the century-long reign of gasoline. And then there was Maxwell's car, silent, unassuming, but radiating an aura of mystery that made the crowd lean in closer. When the flag dropped, engines roared and the cars surged forward. The Tesla moved with quiet grace, while the fuel car blasted ahead with raw power. But Maxwell's car, though silent, matched every pace effortlessly, gliding forward without the faintest vibration of strain. Hours passed. The Tesla pulled into its first charging stop, the fuel car into a gas station. Crowds gathered around Maxwell's car, realizing it hadn't slowed down, hadn't stopped, hadn't even hinted at exhaustion. Social media exploded. "How is it still going?" trended worldwide. By the halfway mark, the Tesla needed its second long recharge. The gasoline car, too, pulled in for fuel again. Meanwhile, Maxwell's car cut through the landscape like a shadow that refused to fade. Journalists riding alongside reported the surreal sensation of watching a car that simply refused to pause. Whispers turned into shouts. Commentators debated live on air, "If this is real, it changes everything." Oil executives issued cautious statements. Automaker CEOs looked grim in hastily arranged press conferences. Yet none of their words could drown out the truth unfolding mile after mile on global screens. By nightfall, the final leg of the 1,000-mile challenge was underway. The Tesla, though impressive, had fallen far behind after repeated recharges. The fuel car pushed hard but was visibly straining, guzzling tank after tank. And Maxwell's car? Still gliding, smooth, unstoppable, and eerily calm. As it crossed the finish line without ever stopping for energy, the crowd erupted into a roar that echoed around the world. Fireworks lit the night sky, commentators shouted over each other, and in living rooms across the globe, people realized they were witnessing a revolution. The once ridiculed idea of free energy had just crushed the titans of industry in broad daylight. Maxwell stepped onto the stage to address the world. Cameras zoomed in on his calm but determined face. He didn't speak like a salesman, nor like a scientist desperate for recognition. Instead, his words carried a tone of inevitability. "What you saw today is only the beginning. This is not just about cars, it's about people. It's about freedom. For too long, humanity has been chained to systems designed to profit from scarcity. Today, we proved that abundance is possible. And tomorrow, we will expand this vision far beyond vehicles." The crowd thundered with applause, but the implications were just beginning to ripple. Oil prices began to crash overnight. Stock markets wavered. Governments scrambled, torn between embracing the breakthrough or resisting it to protect powerful interests. And ordinary people, millions of them, dreamed for the first time of a world where energy no longer controlled their lives. This was no longer just a story about Africa. It was now a story about the entire human race standing at the edge of a new era. In the days following the 1,000-mile demonstration, headlines dominated every major news outlet. The end of oil. Tesla outpaced by free energy car. Africa sparks global energy revolution. Overnight, Maxwell's name became a symbol of possibility. Yet alongside the wave of awe came a storm of resistance. Government officials in oil-dependent nations convened emergency meetings. Secret memos circulated warning of economic destabilization if Maxwell's invention spread unchecked. Energy conglomerates began lobbying aggressively, pushing for regulations that would delay or block the rollout of free energy cars. Some even launched smear campaigns, hiring experts to appear on television and cast out, "The technology is unproven. It's a hoax. It violates the laws of physics. But their efforts were undermined by the undeniable evidence. Millions had seen the car race across 1,000 miles without fuel or charging. No amount of spin could erase the memory of that spectacle. In fact, every attempt to discredit Maxwell only fueled public curiosity. People demanded answers, and more importantly, access. In Africa, the reaction was profoundly different. Crowds gathered in city squares, celebrating the idea that the continent, long viewed as dependent on global powers, was now leading humanity into a new era. Leaders from 25 African states signed a joint declaration of support for Maxwell's technology, pledging to integrate free energy infrastructure across borders. Africa will no longer be a consumer, one president declared at a press conference. We will be the source of a new industrial revolution. Meanwhile, ordinary people around the world began organizing. Social media campaigns demanded governments adopt Maxwell's invention. Petitions gained millions of signatures. In cities from Sao Paulo to Berlin, protesters marched with signs reading "Energy belongs to humanity" and "Free power, free future." The movement was no longer about cars. It had become a call for liberation from the systems that dictated the cost of living. Tesla, caught in the center of the storm, responded cautiously. Elon Musk publicly congratulated Maxwell on his achievement, but insiders revealed panic within the company. Engineers worked around the clock to see if they could replicate or adapt aspects of the technology, while investors worried about the future of electric cars. Oil companies, however, were less diplomatic. Rumors spread of shadowy attempts to sabotage Maxwell's operations, strange cyber attacks on Seth Technology servers, surveillance drones near his research facilities, even offers of astronomical sums of money to buy the patents and bury them. But Maxwell refused every offer. He appeared on global television once again, this time sitting calmly in his workshop surrounded by prototypes. His message was direct: this technology is not for sale. It will not be locked in vaults. It will not be silenced. It belongs to the people, and we will build it together. That statement set off a wave of global momentum. Engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs from every corner of the globe reached out, offering collaboration. Entire universities shifted their research programs overnight. Within weeks, small factories began assembling Maxwell's free energy units, smuggling them into countries where resistance was strongest. Black markets buzzed with activity, not for drugs or weapons, but for devices that could power a home indefinitely without ever paying an electric bill. Governments tried to tighten control, but the movement was too widespread. For every barrier, a new solution emerged. Like water, the idea of free energy seeped into every crack of society. And while resistance from the old world order remained fierce, the tide of change could not be held back forever. Maxwell had lit a fire that could no longer be extinguished. As free energy devices quietly spread into homes, workshops, and vehicles across the globe, the old order began to unravel in ways no one could have fully predicted. Within months, utility companies that had once been considered untouchable giants faced plummeting revenues. Oil tankers that once crowded harbors sat idle, contracts cancelled as demand evaporated. Stock markets, long fueled by the certainty of fossil energy, convulsed with instability. In New York, traders stared at red screens as the energy sector collapsed. "We're witnessing the death of an industry," one analyst whispered live on air, his voice trembling. In the Middle East, oil ministers gathered in urgent summits, their frustration boiling over as they realized their most valuable export was rapidly becoming irrelevant. For nations built on petroleum wealth, the threat was existential. Yet even as powerful industries faltered, something extraordinary began to blossom at the grassroots. Small villages in Africa, Asia, and Latin America that had lived in darkness for generations suddenly lit up, not with wires strung from distant grids, but with compact free energy units installed in schools, clinics, and homes. Farmers powered irrigation systems without ever worrying about fuel costs. Children studied by electric lamps for the first time, their laughter echoing in villages glowing like stars in the night. In Europe, entire neighborhoods unshackled themselves from national power grids, running homes, transport, and businesses on self-contained energy. In rural America, communities long abandoned by corporations embraced the technology, transforming barns into workshops where free energy vehicles were assembled by hand. A quiet but unstoppable revolution was underway, people were learning to live beyond the reach of monopolies. But with liberation came chaos. Governments lost tax revenues tied to oil and electricity sales. In some countries, austerity measures caused unrest. Riots broke out in capitals where leaders tried to ban Maxwell's technology, branding it illegal. Police clashed with protesters carrying glowing signs powered by the very devices the state wanted to suppress. "You cannot outlaw the future," they shouted in defiance. Meanwhile, Maxwell himself became a symbol far larger than one man. To some, he was a savior, a visionary who gave humanity the keys to freedom. To others, especially those whose power was slipping, he was a dangerous disruptor threatening world order. Conspiracy theories swirled. Some claimed he had been backed by secret global powers, others that he was a prophet fulfilling destiny. Maxwell ignored them all, focusing on one mission: scaling the technology so no one could ever again monopolize energy. As months turned into years, the world entered a new phase of transition. Oil-dependent economies fractured. Entire sectors of industry collapsed while new ones rose. Energy empires fought desperately to maintain control, but each victory was fleeting. The people had tasted freedom, and they would not return to chains. The story of humanity was no longer about who controlled resources. It was about what people could create when resources were limitless. And in that new age, the name Maxwell Chikumbutso became etched into history, not as a man who invented a machine, but as the one who ignited the greatest transformation civilization had ever known. Nations soon began to redefine themselves, not by the resources beneath their soil but by the imagination of their people. Africa, long painted as dependent on foreign aid, suddenly emerged as the world center for innovation. Cities like Harare, Nairobi, and Lagos became magnets for entrepreneurs, engineers, and thinkers eager to build industries no longer shackled by fuel or electricity costs. Free energy incubators sprouted everywhere, turning once overlooked communities into hubs of technology. In schools, children were taught not just mathematics and science, but how to harness the devices that powered their world. A generation grew up never knowing the hum of fossil-fueled engines or the anxiety of power cuts. They thought of energy not as something to be rationed or purchased, but as an eternal companion, as abundant as air. Global culture shifted. Art, music, and film embraced themes of limitless possibility. Spaces once dim and forgotten lit up with creativity. A painter in Dakar used free-powered digital studios to share her work with the world. A farmer in Brazil powered drones to map his fields. A collective in rural India broadcast lessons across villages without ever worrying about the price of electricity. But as humanity advanced, the battle for control did not vanish. In hidden boardrooms, displaced corporations funded campaigns of misinformation, painting free energy as unstable, unsafe, even alien. Sabotage attempts against Maxwell's factories were reported. Whispers of espionage filled the air. Some governments, fearing the loss of authority, demanded that every household unit be registered, taxed, and tracked. Maxwell, however, had anticipated this. Years earlier, he had ensured the blueprints were quietly released across encrypted networks, downloaded by millions. No amount of suppression could erase what the world had already claimed. He once said in a rare interview, "I was never here to sell a product. I was here to end dependence." And as the 25 million lives connected to free energy grew into 100 million, then a billion, the struggle transformed from resistance to inevitability. The old powers could stall, but they could not stop. Humanity had crossed a threshold where the story of scarcity was no longer believable. The New World era had begun, a civilization where energy was free, innovation unchained, and the potential of billions no longer strangled by cost or access. The question was no longer if this technology would reshape the planet. It was, what kind of world will humanity build now that the impossible is real? And so, what began as one man's dream in a modest Zimbabwean workshop became the catalyst for the greatest transformation in human history. The free energy network was no longer just an African triumph, it became humanity's shared victory. From the buzzing streets of Lagos to the neon skylines of Tokyo, from remote villages in the Amazon to high-tech hubs in Silicon Valley, the hum of Maxwell's vision could be felt in every corner of the Earth. The world that once argued over oil, gas, and electricity now debated only one thing: how far imagination could take us when energy was no longer a barrier. Nations collaborated instead of competing, innovation surged instead of stalling, and progress finally aligned with the survival of the planet. Maxwell Chikumbutso never sought fame, yet his name was written into the fabric of history. Not as a scientist alone, nor as an inventor, but as the man who gave humanity its freedom from scarcity. His dream had become a legacy, a light burning endlessly, untouchable and unquenchable.